You guys ready for an interrogation? So I figure we'll start this off. I took some notes so I look intelligent. I'll start this off if you guys want to spend like 2, maybe 3 minutes just talking about yourselves, introducing yourself to the audience so they know who you are. I know a lot of you have books or books in the works. If you wanted to share those, I think that would be a valuable asset for the community. So, Dave.
Okay, Dave Snowden. I work at the intersection of academic and practice. We apply natural science to social systems rather than case-based approaches, and we develop methods and tools, and originated in knowledge management, but now spread much wider.
Julie Mohr, Principal Analyst with Forrester. One of my primary areas of research is KM practices and IT service management.
I'm Dan Rasmus. I'm the founder of Serious Insights, a boutique industry analyst firm. And I concentrate on thinking about the future effectively, using scenario planning, and I also dabble in collaboration, knowledge management, and the future of work. And while I have you, please take this survey. We need statistically valid results. So I'm going to remind you one last time. Thank you.
Excellent. Hi, my name is Ross Smith. I am an author of The AI Revolution in Customer Service and Support, out as of August, I guess. And also my day job is AI related and in customer support. That's where a lot of the content comes from. I've also been working on AI as part of a PhD program for probably 5 or 6 years, thinking, okay, it'll take me 10 years to finish the PhD, and that by that time AI, well, I missed it by like 7 years, right? It's here now, so thank you for including me.
Ross does have to abandon us a little early to catch a flight. He had some fun flight adventures on the way here, so don't be bummed out when he leaves early.
Yeah, and I could not get my digital twin to sit in for me, so sorry about that.
No worries. So the first question I have for you, in one word or phrase, if you were to describe the current state of knowledge management, what would it be and why?
Here we go again.
Get one word.
No,
that's your phrase. Or phrase. That's your phrase.
Yeah.
That works.
If you want me to say why, because
Yes, please.
I think it's about the 5th or 6th cycle I've seen of knowledge management from sort of collapsing and going back up again. And each time it makes an identical mistake. It focuses on the tools and information, not on the networks and the people. And it's making exactly the same mistakes with AI this time that it made with pure codification 20 years ago.
Okay.
I would say exciting. As a long-time practitioner in this space, I've seen a lot of challenges that we have looked at to combat with, helping the cultural side of things and building better practices and trying to convince people that things need to be done. And I think with the advancements we're seeing in AI, we finally see technology creeping a little closer to helping us, give us a better set of tools to drive that change that we've always been looking for within organizations.
I would say recursive. I agree with Dave. I think we've seen a lot of this before. I lean a little bit more into tools, I think, than Dave may. But I look at the tool as a forcing function for us to do all the stuff we said we were going to do before and didn't do well, about the humans and the content and how we share and learn. If we want AI to be successful in its current state, and I don't believe this is its end state, its current state, then we have to get our act together on content. And I've never seen anybody do that well, over the course of 20-some years doing this, right? So good luck all.
Excellent. So I'll say, I'll say intriguing, if I can sneak another in, and recursive, but in a different way. In that I think what's intriguing is, every month a new model comes out that's better than the previous month, right? The space is moving very quickly. But the recursive piece is, I think it's really intriguing to think about what happens when it starts training on its own generated content, right? And what does that world look like, and what is the human role in that world, I think is just fascinating. And if you were really to go back, a couple years, we would be talking about like, wow, that's never going to happen. That's 50 years in the future, right? And it's moving so fast that it's intriguing, exciting. I'll just copy everyone else's words. But yeah,
I never thought we'd be stupid enough to let a model train itself on its own data. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, I've been in modeling, I've been in AI all my life. I've got no problem with tools. But the minute you allow something to feed off its own output, you know it's degenerating.
right.
And people just, I mean, the lack of awareness of what AI is and the implications of it, and the blind adoption of it on the basis that there is some wonderful utopia that we are moving towards, without anybody being able to define that utopia, is not what tools are about.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I just did a podcast recently that the podcaster got fascinated. I was talking about my futures of AI that I have, and he was very fascinated with the meh future, where AI was just there. It got stupid, and we just used it, and it still did your email and still generated stuff, but we didn't care. It was kind of like the microwave oven. E equals MC squared right there in your kitchen, and no one's excited about it.
Awesome.
I guess I'm alone in the camp up here of excitement around this. My early experimentation has been nothing but positive, and it doesn't replace my thinking, and it doesn't replace the need for me to have critical thinking skills and to evaluate stuff, but it does have the ability to assist. And to me, that's the value add. As a knowledge worker, I do a lot of things every day in my job, especially as a researcher, that are very manual in nature. I'm not asking the machine to think for me. I'm not assuming that it is thinking for me. But the ability to look at a set of data and kind of drive some outcome from that might spark an idea, or, I work in a very kind of isolated area. I don't have peers that I can every day go, hey, what do you think about this, right? We're kind of autonomously running. So I'm using it more as a platform to help drive creative thinking and innovation. I'm not trusting everything that it produces as being an outcome or being accurate. I'm using it as a collaborative tool. So for me, there's value there. And that's why I'm excited about it as a knowledge worker. These are tools that can help. They're not going to replace anything, but they can definitely help.
And nobody denies that. I just used ChatGPT to devise a 2-hour photography-orientated walking tour of Washington for me tomorrow. And it does that absolutely brilliantly, all right? Far better than I could have done myself with loads of research. And nobody's denying what you said as what it should be. That's not what organizations are doing. They're seeing it as replacing human function. We're already seeing human beings become dependent on it and not risk going against the AI recommendation. Yeah, so, I mean, everything you said, I fully agree with, but that's not the universe we're facing with the way people are trying to use AI.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the combination of human plus machine is going to be better than either one individually for a while now. And I think when you get good at it, you can ask it for a metaphor from this industry about this industry, right? Things like that, when you've got the right use cases, it can be really powerful.
Somebody, Mark Downham in LinkedIn, I promised to credit him the first time I used it, came up with a brilliant phrase the other day. He said, we've got a choice. Is it the singularity or is it symbiosis? Mm-hmm. And at the moment, pressure on cost in companies is driving us into the singularity, not symbiosis.
Yeah, if you look at the BCG study that everybody continues to quote, they always quote about the mediocrity of, there's kind of these midterm people who are doing consulting, and then there's the high-end consultants, and most of the people who are at the middle level can achieve the goals of the high-end consulting if they use AI. If I'm the high-end consultant, I'm not sure how I feel about that, or I should say I'm pretty sure how I feel about that. If people who are not as good as me now have this augmented tool, great for the company, not so good for motivating high-end consultants that you want to keep to help build a business.
I completely agree. It's one of the most hysterical things, right? We all know that the big consultancies just regurgitate old content. Yeah. The find and replace function in Word is there entirely at the request of big consultancies. And now they're totally celebrating the fact that AI can do it better. Yeah. Right?
Well,
and that's not what it's about.
Yeah. And nobody ever, go look at the report, nobody ever talks about the fact that when the AI is wrong, the mid-level consultants go with the AI instead of the facts. So, yeah.
He's trying to get us back on track. He's
No, this is good. I'm having a blast. So I wish I would have done this a little different. So there's a fun tool that I'm trying to use called Infer Notice, and I can like see what everyone's talking about in a graph and tell me where we're differing and what we're missing. And so recursively, we have two people that say they're excited about AI or intrigued by AI, and two people think that it might, if we don't utilize it correctly, we may be pivoting in the wrong direction, or we may be degrading what we're trying to accomplish. So with those two perspectives in mind, how do you see the future of KM with AI in those regards? So do you think there's a way we can no longer regress for the regressors? And then do you think there's a way to make it even better for the people that are promoters?
Okay, when I started in KM, it was a director level position. So KM was a strategic objective, and it was about innovation and decision making. And what it then did is it forgot about that, and it focused on content management and taxonomies. And taxonomy rhymes with taxidermy for a good reason. That was kind of like the route it took, all right? And it's now a subset of the IT department. I mean, to be quite honest, AI is the driver, not KM. Yeah, companies are adopting AI. It's been driven, I mean, Microsoft are driving it with exactly the same model that they drove Microsoft Office, with exactly the same consequences. And I need to be careful here, but I got told in one company we're working with, you cannot criticize AI because the board have committed to it as a policy. Right? Now, when you say you can't criticize a tool, and this is one of the world's biggest companies, yeah, it's the same reason. I mean, sorry, I'm an Apple boy, not, Windows is a primitive calculating machine, not a computer. But fundamentally,
Microsoft's here, he's going to.
And I'll repeat it, this is the non-critical adoption of a tool, and this is the point I think you made, which I completely agree with. Tools are meant to support what we do, not replace it. So I think one of the issues for KM, to be honest, is you guys, and sorry, I'm not in KM anymore, I'm much more in strategy and next generation scenario creation and some quite nasty political stuff, all right? But fundamentally, I think the issue for KM is, do you want to be strategic again, or do you want to be a continued minor set of the IT department with occasional forays into OD? Right? And KM could become strategic, it could have a role, but it won't do it unless it reacquires critical capability, and it reacquires the ability to use human knowledge in symbiosis with tools. And at the moment, it's entirely focused on text. Text is less than 10% of what human beings can know.
If I look at technology, there has always been this promise that technology is going to drive so much change. And it's been progressive, right? We went from, I think in my presentation, I talked about punch cards to terminals to PCs to the cell phone, and now we have this new interface for us to interact with technology. It's always been about the experts knowing how to do things and having the tools to do what they need to do and to do what they do better. And now we see something that could be used by the masses. So one of the things that excites me and why I'm so positive about this is technology has always had these promises that are far-fetched. We always know when we sit down with a vendor that only about 20% of what they're telling us is the truth, and we've got to figure out the rest of it, right? We have to make sure we're choosing the right technology. But the technology holds a different promise, a different way to interact with information than we have had in the past. The ability to question, to ask, to have conversations, to generate content, a first draft. Not something we're going to use, but a first draft of something. These are two capabilities that up until the introduction of the LLM and the advancement by understanding and being able to better predict the next word in a sentence, we haven't had these capabilities. We're at the beginning of this journey. That's why I'm so excited about it. We have so much promise in the future. If I can help an organization to use this technology more effectively and to adopt it in a way that's going to make a difference for them, that's why I'm here. That's why I attended this event. I'm not going to sit here and say that the technology doesn't have its failures or its problems or things that we have to be aware of, but this is an exciting time. We're seeing technology do things it hasn't done in the past. Are there impacts? Absolutely. But there have been impacts along the way in this journey, and we have to navigate those impacts to get the value from the technology.
I teach my students at the University of Washington, any Huskies, to not answer that question. To say rather that we have a way of thinking about the future that is non-definitive. We live in a bubble of uncertainty, and I think that's absolutely true. When you ask about what the future of AI is going to be, there are social and technological and economic and political issues that are going to influence it. There are many lawsuits out there, for instance, that have not been tried yet and could change what we think of as OpenAI or Anthropic, and they could be forced to do things that would change our experience with the tools that we're using. There could be political regulation, as we're already seeing in Europe, or no political regulation, as we're seeing here, and likely may see going into the future. You know, I have multiple futures that I look at, everything from the MEF future to one I call for God or country, where the AI is purposefully biased and gives you the answers that you should have. And so there's a wide range of possible answers to that question.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Is an exciting time, really once in a generation. And you look back, and I like to look back and look at different introductions throughout history. And so I'll use for this example the wheel, right? So the wheel comes along like, hey, the research guys down in the lab invented this thing. I'm not sure what to use it for. Oh, I can put it on a wagon. And someone said, oh, you know what? I'm going to turn it on its side and make clay. And then someone else said, I'm going to put it in the water and generate a mill. Right? And I think that's where we are now, is so you're going to have this separation. You know, the person milling grain with next to a river is way ahead of the person who's doing it by hand, right? And so, but eventually these people catch up. So I think initially we'll see sort of a separation. You'll be able to say, oh, that person's really good at AI and that person's not. And then over time, those will start to equalize as people start to learn and the tools get better and the underlying models get better.
I think we're all agreed that the thing has high potential, AI has. There's an obsessive focus with LLM, which is a problem in its own right. There are actually better AI tools for a lot of things than LLM. Yeah? So there's an obsession with that, but we're all agreed that that technology advance is useful, it could be critical, no problem. Yeah? But let's look at the issues we're not addressing. So impact. One of the main impacts of LLM is a rapid acceleration of global warming. Yeah? Nobody is addressing that. Nobody has talked about this at this conference. Every time you create a trading algorithm, it's the equivalent of a transatlantic flight. The Norwegians are sinking actual coolants off their coast, which will accelerate the unfreezing of the North Pole. Yeah, so again, this is a blind rush, and Sam said it the other day. Oh, don't worry, LLM will find a solution before it gets too bad. Now, yeah, that is just crazy, all right? It's like, you know, let's just build a nuclear plant in the back garden, and I'm sure we can think about what we could do with the waste later, right? So you got that one. The other one, I think, which people aren't, sorry, I've just come from a depressing lunch meeting, all right? The other thing which people aren't thinking about is the algorithms and the data scraping are controlled by a small number of companies who are becoming increasingly misogynist, if you look at their composition. Yeah, so if I'm going to be, probably shouldn't say this, but increasingly controlled by 40-year-old misogynist males who take Ayn Rand seriously after puberty, which for me is grounds for commitment to a mental hospital, all right? So the cultural specificity of the people building these things. And I agree that democratization of access to data is really important. But you should read Neil Stephenson's Dodge in Hell, which is it's a terrible science fiction book, apart from the first 3 chapters. And it basically argues that we are now in a point where only the rich can afford to be told whether the information they are receiving is true or not. Everybody else is being sold to somebody who manipulates the data they're receiving. Right, so I've just been in a meeting about elections and various things like that, right? So fundamentally, you've got limited control of the algorithms and the data source. And again, I'll come back to it in terms of the conference. The conference has been about AI. None of it has been about the awareness of the risks with AI or how we as a KM community can contribute to understand that and do something about it. Yeah, so yeah, tools are great. We all need tools, but you know, we need to be aware of the consequences. And the consequences of AI are considerably more than a couple of Neolithic people creating a wheel.
Yes, true.
Yeah,
Some of us did do risk presentations, by the way.
yeah, but not
I think there's another risk, and I talked about this in my session around critical thinking skills.
yeah.
I see my spouse, who's a Spanish teacher in high school, the impact of COVID and what that had on critical thinking skills of children. You know, pretty much everybody during COVID cheated on every homework assignment they ever had because there was no one watching them. They could use the internet. And so there's a delay now in their learning and their critical thinking skills that is very evident in the classroom. We already had generations that were brought up on the internet who thought that internet equaled intelligence. You know, and it's kind of laughable, but it is a reality. And so where do we build those critical skills? We're going to have a lot of people coming into the workforce that are, you know, using generative AI on a regular basis instead of doing the thinking and the learning that they need to do. And so whose responsibility is that going to be when they come into the workforce and they're seeing the tool as what? Is it going to be a companion or is it going to just do my job? I don't have an answer to that, but I know we need to address critical thinking, and it needs to be part of our strategy.
And I think that's one of the most important points we've had so far, because also as we've moved forward on cognitive neuroscience.
I apologize, I have to run. Thank you all for including me. Thank you all.
Yeah.
It's been
Thanks,
great.
Ross.
So if you look at the developments in new theories of consciousness, the argument now is consciousness is not co-located with the brain. It's distributed into the body and the social environment. Yeah, we know in epigenetic terms that social contact can impact on cognitive capability. We know that trust is partly determined by smell. So we're starting to understand that human beings are not, to quote my daughter's A-level textbook in psychology, a limited capacity information processing device. Yeah, we're something more substantial than that. And I think what you've raised is a critical issue because we don't yet fully understand how human consciousness and decision-making works. And therefore, the automation isn't going to match that. And the danger is we lose that capacity.
Yeah, and I think just going to the model issue, I recently presented and talked about nuclear power investments by the big companies. And the models that we have are very energy inefficient, especially when they're learning. There are new models, as Dave alluded to. I've been looking at like liquid AI, for instance, that has a more efficient learning model, and it's probably not, it's based on a worm. So that's the one thing we actually know, how the worm's neurons are put together. We don't know how ours actually work yet. And we are told that these are based on human models, but they're based on flawed human models. And if they were based on real human models, you wouldn't need a nuclear power plant to run the training, because we don't need one, right? We just need Cheerios and Cocoa Puffs. And so you know, I think we have to realize that we're at a point in time, as Julie said, very early in this, and I think a lot of this stuff is going to change. One of the phrases I would love you to take away is, we talk about the rapid pace of change. I think we're also looking at a rapid pace of change and obsolescence as well. Things are going to get as obsolete faster now than they were before. And so a lot of the assumptions that we make now and the discussions that we're having today, this time next year, I'd love this panel to reconvene to talk about what's different this year. And I think unlike previous years, if we don't talk about knowledge management, because we've all agreed that there's some kind of steady state of great knowledge management practices, but if we talk about AI and our relationship to it, I think that's going to be something that's going to evolve very quickly over the next.
It was summarized for me the other day. So I wrote a 9,000-word paper, which has just been published, all right, on foresight.
Okay.
And it brings constructor theory from theoretical physics together with delusion epistemology. So it's a very novel fusion, right? I'm quite proud of it. It's getting lots of citations. I gave it to AI, and I actually asked it what it thought I would say in that paper, and it was just nonsense. When I fed it the paper and said, what will be the objections to this paper, I actually got what the objections were from the conventional community, like the systems thinking community and those, because it was able to summarize convention,
Right.
but it wasn't able to handle novelty.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that, for me, summarized the issue. It was extremely useful to me in that context, because it helped me prepare for it and think for it. But it couldn't handle novelty.
Right. Because I mean, that's one of the things it's everything, right? All the AI, unlike us, where we have opinions and biases and thoughts, and we're agents and independent of each other, and that's one of the reasons we have knowledge management, is because we want to connect and share, because we can't just plug into each other. The AI is plugged into everything, right? It is all things. It is all opinions. It is all information. It is completely different than us, right? There's no human being that thinks like the AI. And we can tell it that, you're a customer service agent in a large manufacturing company, but it still has all of that stuff in its repositories, and so it's a very different beast than we are, and I think that's absolutely right. It's very good at understanding the broad sense of things, but novelty and innovation are not its strong suits.
So here's a question then. So we've been talking about AI as this big innovation. Is there any other innovations in KM, or is AI the only innovation that we have on the horizon? Is there anything that you can think of that, without using the word AI, do you have an innovation or a new process that you think would be, or strategy, that would be beneficial to the KM community? But you can't use the word AI or artificial intelligence.
I have no intention of doing so. So my background's physics and philosophy, right? One of the fascinating things coming out of theoretical physics at the moment is the idea that information may have momentum. And that's coming from 2 or 3 different sources, right? Now that makes a lot of sense, because it would also match in with, as I say, delusion epistemology, the concept of assemblage. So I think what we're starting to see out of physics and reconsidering time, so the arrow of time has been challenged. So I think there are things at the moment coming from physics and theoretical biology which will transform KM practice, right? But I don't see many people paying attention to them. So that for me is the really exciting thing, is starting to re-understand the nature of information, not seeing it as something static, seeing it as something dynamic, and also seeing, this is new materialism, the way in which narratives at scale have material reality and can capture people into attractor wells. Now that's where we can use technology, but not AI, to represent that. So as I say, I think the big thing KM always used to do, but it doesn't do anymore, is it was transdisciplinary. Yeah, and it really isn't transdisciplinary anymore. It's all coming from a limited number of resources. And again, I think we could do with reinventing that.
I am just amazed every time you talk.
Thank you.
That was good. That was good.
I'm kind of focused on so much more the practicality of what we do on a day-to-day basis, because I've been there, I've done that. And right now, I've just started, I'm finishing up a wave where I looked at a lot of the knowledge management products and evaluated them in detail. And one of the areas of questions that I asked was all around, what are we measuring? How do we understand if this is working? And I just didn't have this degree of confidence that what we're getting back from the tool vendors is really helping organizations to understand the effectiveness of knowledge management. So my next research project is to go out there and talk to individuals like you guys, if you're interested in having a conversation about how you're measuring and finding out what capabilities we can, what the future looks like there, so that we can have a better understanding of how good is our knowledge and how effective is it before we start using it to train models We got to have good quality data. We don't want to get it the opposite way, which is to train it, fail miserably, have the hallucinations, and then go back and fix our data. So I think measurement is a really important thing to be able to understand the quality, the veracity, the heat map of what is important from a knowledge management perspective that we have in our knowledge stores, and what's the quality of that so that we can take advantage as the AI continues to evolve.
I'm going to do an American Pickers version of this and talk about an antique. It's interesting, and I mean, the presentation just before this panel talked about, chunking and, putting content, and the tables are too big and all that kind of stuff. I did a piece probably 20 years ago on knowledge assembly or content assembly. And I made the argument that we should be writing our content so that we understood that it was pieces of knowledge that we could then assemble into a large document if we needed to, but that the individual pieces, so this was from a collaboration perspective. If you're writing a comment on a document in an email, what you do is you go into that, you used to do this in the old days, right? You'd say, in paragraph 3, I disagree with this thing that you did. And then you'd have to open the document and figure out what paragraph 3 was. Well, we've now put the tools to do the annotation inside the content, but we're still writing the content as long form, which is not the best way to consume that content. I argued with the development team, my fellow analysts is on the development side, and because I wanted to use those metaphors. I wanted to talk about putting content as components and then having a content compiler that knew what the intent was of the thing that you were trying to generate, and then it would generate that content for you. There was I gave an award to IBM. This is why I'm saying it's an antique. I gave an award to IBM because they had a proposal management system written in Lotus Notes that was fully distributed to people. And so the different teams all had their pieces, and their business motivation was, we never want to be the company that FedExes the proposal to overnight to our potential customer. We want to be early. And so they had version control, and everybody knew, and then they'd flip a switch and proposal. Components, compiled, proposal, did a couple edits, off it went. And everybody else, because I worked in aerospace at one point as well, and it's Friday night and the proposal's due at 5 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock now, we probably should get down to the FedEx office and ship it off, right? I think AI is forcing us to rethink content. I don't think it's forcing us quite enough to rethink content yet, because we're not really doing it that way. But I think we need to. I think it's a technology that's already exists. If on a Mac, if you play with a product called Scrivener, you can kind of get that experience of seeing a bunch of cards that you can then compile into a piece of content. But that's one for me. It's just a pet idea that I think we need to consider.
There was an interesting human phenomena in IBM around that system.
Yeah.
Because what generated were what were called OMSIS pirates. Right? So IBM decided that, very sensibly, lots of different people would end up talking with clients. You often got introduced to somebody in IBM by your client. You didn't know it. So it's kind of like, knowledge management function, let's get everything in one place. What then happened is political actors in IBM scrolled the system to try and find projects which were likely to be bought by the client, and then claimed ownership of those projects for their business unit. And they were called OMSIS pirates. So the practice emerged of not putting anything into the system until the last possible moment, because that way you could avoid the OMSIS pirates grabbing it. Yeah? And I think, again, one of the things knowledge management need to be aware of is the more you make something explicit, the more political actors will game it. Yeah? And that's where the trust thing comes in. Right? So I think it's like I took AI out of a North Sea rig because it was stopping geophysicists from drilling. Because they would only drill if the AI said it was okay. Yeah, and that was the behavioral aspect. So I think the human behavioral aspects of this are big.
Yeah. Well, we should all be better people, too. That'd be
yeah, well, come on. I don't want to predicate my future on that assumption, all right? So it's like...
Great. So we only have 10 minutes left. So I wanted to see if you guys wanted to share a minute or two of where you think the most important advice we can give to people about knowledge management, either as it relates about AI or as it relates about a new strategy or a new process. If you were to give everyone here one piece of advice that they can go home today and make, or tomorrow, I guess, and make a big impact in their organization, what would that advice be? You can think about it if you need. Take your time.
I can go first.
Oh, Julie already has one. All right.
There was a section in my presentation where I talked about the long-standing beliefs that we have in knowledge management and how these are going to evolve and need to evolve as we continue this adoption of AI and machine learning. We've always kind of thought about knowledge management needing to be a source of truth, right? A single source of truth. To me, we're moving into an era where we see a moment of truth, where we have access in these systems, where even though in the record we have a current state for a customer, an email has just come in or a new proposal has just been signed, right? There is a much more, there's a capability now for us to bring knowledge in from many different sources to get a moment of truth. What that means is we, as individuals, as consumers of knowledge, have to do our own due diligence, right? We can't just go to the system of record. You know, we have to be cognizant that there could be new information in the system. How we manage that, I don't know, but I see that as part of the future. We've leaned very heavily on validated knowledge. I think knowledge is very dynamic. And so thinking that we are going to be able to validate something after every iteration that it changes is an impossible future. But if we kind of change our mindset to say it's trusted or untrusted, and that something will pivot between that state in its life cycle, I think that's an important thing. I use it and it works, I trust it. I put my trust stamp on that. Someone else uses it, it didn't work in their context. You know, it's untrusted, right? So it's kind of more of a dynamic score, which would indicate to the next person that goes to use it, wow, I should probably do my due diligence here. I can't trust this. But if I use it and it works, right, that's something very different. I have a bunch of these in my presentation, and I apologize it's not available yet, but it will be. But it's also about kind of changing the mindset of consumers from searching to discovery. Right? We are very, as a society, trained by Google to go search, go through results, to find and to find the information we need. You know, that dynamic changes. We can discover information now that we may have been siloed from in the past. We can connect with people that we haven't been able to connect with in the past. I don't want to take up more than my 2 minutes, but I just feel like we have an opportunity here to help shape the way that people think about knowledge and the way that we can use this in the future. And there's a lot of cultural change that's going to happen with that.
I like the moment of truth. That's awesome.
Okay. If I was going to hit just one thing, but I'm going to give three, but I'll just do the one thing quickly, all right? Is start to realize that knowledge and information are intertwined, yeah, but knowledge is not defined by information, yeah, because everything I've seen is focused on that. But I would go for three things. One is to actually build on what you just said. Discovery is more important than search. And one of the key things that we've worked on, and this is critical in a crisis, is how do you repurpose existing capability for novel use? All right? So, for example, when somebody realized the significance of a chocolate bar melted in their pocket and put a metal box around the magneto, we got microwave ovens. Yeah, IBM dominated computers because it was good at punch cards. Right? So one of the functions of knowledge management is to map all existing knowledge bases of the company, its network, at a very fine level of granularity, not the current level, and you need high abstraction metadata so that you can repurpose existing capability for novel use more or less instantly. Yeah, and that's a key function. The history of human technology is repurposing, not invention. Yeah? And that's a discovery process, it's a suggestion process. Second one is fundamentally networking. We focus on content when we should focus on channels. I mean, the late, great Larry Prusak, who we all miss, right, famously said, if you have $1 to spend on knowledge management, spend 1 cent on technology and 99 cents on connecting people. Yeah, and that's still a good adage, right? If you can get everybody in informal networks within 3 phone calls of the CEO, you've done everything you really need to do as a knowledge management function, because you built the connectivity based on trust by which knowledge can flow very quickly. If you try and do that on a content base, you can never know what content you will need next year. The dynamic nature is such you need to do it. So that's the sort of network side of it. And I think the third one is focus on the input, not the output. We did a big project for the European Union about how do you validate what's on the internet. And everybody else tried to create algorithms to tell you what was true or false. We focused on actually getting input into the system that we knew was true at the point of entry, rather than trying to work it out at the point of output. Yeah, and that leads into what is a passion for us as a company, actually, which is we need epistemically balanced training data sets. Yeah, at the moment, the training data sets are skewed and unbalanced. Yeah, you need ones which are actually epistemically balanced. If anybody hasn't read Scholastic Parrots yet, okay, it was written by a Google employee and published by an ex-Google employee. Yeah, because it basically told the truth about the training algorithms, yeah, which were being used. And RAG isn't good enough because that's taking the same principle. You have to deliberately construct the input into your systems rather than just focusing on the output. And that, interestingly, will increase discovery. Yeah.
I now believe in mind reading. As Dave was speaking, the name Larry Prusak came into my mind exactly at the second that he said that for a completely different reason. At the Institute for Knowledge Management, which was part of IBM, I was invited to their first session as their opening keynote, and I was giving a talk on people, process, and technology. And before I got off my first slide, Larry stood up and he said, "Excuse me, where's the people part? Where's the social part of that?" All of my subsequent presentations said people, process, technology, and social context. And I would say that's the big thing for me, for you guys. I heard a great presentation from the Rogue Credit Union earlier today. The reason they were successful was not because they followed a generic process roadmap for knowledge management, of which I saw many this week. It was because they said, we need to understand our organization. We have a unique culture. We need to understand our people. We invest in our people stay at the Rogue Credit Union because they like their job and they have fun, and we don't want to stop that. So anything that we do, technology, process, whatever, has to understand that this is what we want to be as an organization, and we are unique. I had a slide in that presentation that I gave at IBM, which was a manufacturing company. It was a manufacturing idea, right? There's a component that comes out of the back of a factory. There's trucks that come in. There are people who drive up in the morning and they walk into the company, and there are trucks that drive out in the back every day with product. One company is entrepreneurial, has a bunch of young people. They're using all kinds of new technologies, but they make the exact same thing as the older company that has older machines and antique processes. Their knowledge management is not the same, right? Completely different contexts. One's trying to figure out how not to be overcome by the future and to retain its place in the market, and the other one's trying to figure out what it wants to be and how to dominate the market. Very, very different views of what their strategy are. But at the back end, if you just looked at them from a satellite, you would see component products coming out the back end that looked exactly the same. And we have to realize that as you're applying all of the lessons that you've learned over the last several days, think about your business and to the people issue that Dave, we can't change people, but you can understand them, right? Which is something that the AI can't do. You need to understand the people. If you've got a manager who doesn't want to do something or a vice president who is enthusiastic, work through the obstacles and grab the opportunities and think about how you orchestrate your implementations, because none of this stuff is going to work if it doesn't work in your company, in your organization. And so I would leave you with that thought as a key takeaway.
Julie has one more.
I have one more thing. I'm the emotional, heart-driven person up here. Just kidding, just kidding. I wasn't talking to you, honestly.
Dave and I are going out after this.
No, the slide that I went in
talking
at the
about me again.
beginning had the heart on the right side, so I know he's got heart too, and he knows this. But I have never seen the joy in my husband's face with technology as I did when he first decided to use ChatGPT for the first time. He and I had a conversation. I explained what it was. He wasn't coming near it with a 10-foot pole. Then he started to hear more things at work, and he came back and said, I want to try this. So he was able to craft 30 fairy tale stories using the past participle of Spanish verbs that were on his students' list. And then he was able to create exercises from that where they had to conjugate the verb and put it into the blanks. The excitement in his face about something that would take him a very long time to do, but that he could diversify what he was doing in the classroom with so much ease, that's the future that I'm hanging on to. That, it isn't about getting answers, it's about the power of the next question, right? What can I do with this? Where can I make connections that I don't see or aren't, like you said, you asked it, what is the criticism of my report? That's the power of the next question, right? The first one you asked wasn't giving you information that was relevant, but the second one was more intriguing. That's the power of getting information that allows us to think about it and use it with the critical thinking skills. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Once again, let's give a big round of applause for our closing panel here, as well as all of our sponsors, platinum sponsors, and so forth, for making this possible, and also Jane for doing such a great job on organizing everything. A few quick reminders. The KM and AI Summit, it's the first of its kind, will be taking place in Scottsdale, Arizona, March 17th through 19th. So be there if you'd like to hang out some more. And then KM World 2025 will be back November 17th through the 20th. So we will see you at one of those two events, if not both. Thanks, everyone.